Okay, I read somewhere young Dan Didio's salad years of comics were 70 to 72.
Possibly.
And so that was really interesting though, because I looked back, I did some reading and said, what happened in comics around those times? What happened to DC Comics around that time? Man, Jack Kirby making the transition right over to DC. Such a parallel in my mind when Bendis made the move from Marvel to DC. What can you tell me about how that happened and how that came about, and what role you played, if any, or how that worked?
Yeah, Brian and I had several meetings. I knew his contract was coming to an end, and we had danced around it years before and never was able to pull it off. But this seemed like it was much more real this time. And we sat down, and I forgot, we met in a coffee shop somewhere in Santa Monica. I think it was Santa Monica, and we sat down and just talked comics for about 2 hours. And I didn't know Brian well, to be honest with you, because he was so Marvel, and I just honestly, I don't interact that much. I just really focus on what I'm working on. So I got a chance to know him. He got a chance to know me. We know the same circles. So it was a lot of fun to get to know him. And honestly, he's such a giant in the business. I actually feel he's one of the people that helped reinvent comics a little bit. You talk about those years.
There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about his coming to Marvel.
Yeah.
You're one of several key creators, and it was more of a writer-led revolution at that time, right? That's why I found it kind of interesting, because instead of like Kirby coming over he was a writer too, but primarily known as an artist.
Yeah.
And the industry shifted to be more writer-focused and writer-oriented, it seems, in many ways. And then, so Bendis coming over, he had done a lot at Marvel, mega hits, as well as less than hits in some of the later years. There were some misses there. Came into DC, like you said, Batman was obvious, too obvious, right? That's like, of course, that's what Brian. We're gonna get a dirty crime Michael Bendis story. No, He wanted Superman, and he wanted not just Superman. He wanted to shake things up with Superman. He wanted to make some big changes to the status quo, to which iteration of Superboy are we talking about now? How many, Dan, how many young kids Superman characters does DC need? They have not gotten less. Every year they get another new one and another one and another. So Bendis obviously had some plans and some thoughts on how to put the man into Superman, I think, treat him more like a man. That seems what he's doing there. Tell me about that and maybe how he pitched it.
He pitches the whole story. He wanted to play with the origin a little bit. He really wanted to come back in and really position him. I mean, one of the things that Brian told me early on about Superman for him is that he's a young Jewish kid from Cleveland. So he really related to Siegel and Schuster and their story. And he feels an affinity to the character because of that. And it was very personal. You could tell it was very personal to him about what he felt on. And it was interesting because he came in a lot more aggressive on things that he wanted to do. But then once he understood the mantle of Superman, it became much more. I think he came at it much more traditionally than I actually expected, because I think he realized what it stood for, the character stood for. And once he started writing it, he really started to embrace Superman in the world and the relationships of who all they are, and he really made it his own at that. And listen, we had some wonderful stuff going on with Tomasi and Jurgens right before that. So it wasn't that it was broken before he came in. So he came in and really applied his class, so to speak.
Here's the thing, dude. Here's the thing that I hear from I see on the internet a lot of people complaining about the Super Sons, and they love the Clark Kent relationship. It was so wonderful. And isn't it great to see Clark as a father and his son growing up? But is that not the most boring thing that you've ever heard of? We need some drama. We need some excitement. I'm a stay-at-home dad. I don't want to read that. So
no. Trust me. Hey, listen. I understand that more with Superman than Batman. Let me put it this way. You know what I mean? I think I probably had a more difficult time with the Damian Batman relationship as it started to soften up than I did with Superman and young Jonathan. The irony is, as the story goes, I was You shouldn't say these things. I was a big Super Sons fan in the 70s when they used to run in World's Finest. Paul was not a big fan of Super Sons, as we used to go back and forth. So I got to do my Super Sons story. That's all I know.
Okay, I'm gonna close it on Bendis for a second. He's a personal favorite of mine. He's got a lot of heat. Would you say has his sales reception been what DC hoped it would be? Just keep it real, man.
It's hard to say that because it's hard to do a one-for-one comparison. The business is constantly changing. Do you know what I mean? And
it's hard to say monthly sales of the comic don't tell the whole tale. That's for sure.
Yeah,
right?
and unfortunately, the business is so reliant on variant covers, so reliant on fronting, so reliant on events, so reliant on change or faux change, that when you have a solid story which just delves into the sensibilities of the character and the depth of the character, sometimes that's going unnoticed right now, and that's heart-wrenching to me because that's the stuff that pulled me into it. I wanted that melodramatic soap opera mixed with action adventure on a monthly basis. I didn't need dozens of guest stars every book. I like the things, and I used to joke with the staff. Maybe they don't think it's a joke, probably. One of the things I always hated was a line. I call it the lineup. When every hero shows up at an event and they're all standing there side by side, shoulder to shoulder, staring and listening to somebody, and I'm like, how does each of these characters lose all their individuality when you put them in that big vanity shot?
Right.
Why is Harley Quinn standing next to Batman, next to, Robin, and that's perfectly okay? You're not even looking at the team dynamics anymore. And this goes back to my co-publisher, Jim Lee, who explained it to me so clearly. And when he was drawing X-Men, whenever he drew X-Men, every X-Men was doing something different. One's smoking, one's drinking, one's sitting, one's talking, one's pacing, one's looking the other way. Everybody's doing something different because each movement was based on their individual personalities. But when you do these vanity shots with 500 characters all standing shoulder to shoulder, homogeneously, and they're all hands on hips or smiling, as I like to say, they lose any sense of personality, any sense of uniqueness. And once we started homogenizing them, you stopped losing your ability to tell individual stories in individual books of these characters because everything was built on the mass appeal, the mass approach. Everybody travels in a group. we're all going to go to this event together. Okay. Oh, we're all going to go to this event together. And every time you turn around, everybody's showing up everywhere. It's because we just lost what the books were about.